The day my parents begged for forgiveness. I didn't even recognize their voices. I remember standing there, staring at them, the same people who once threw me out like I was a disgrace. Their eyes, once filled with pride and judgment, now trembled with desperation. I should have felt satisfaction, but all I felt was an ache I thought I'd buried years ago. You see, in my family, respect wasn't love, it was control. Every smile hid a condition, every embrace came with a warning. I learned early that reputation mattered more than truth, and that love only counted when it fit their rules. When I fell in love with someone they called unworthy, my name was erased like I never existed. They shut me out, destroyed my dignity, and told everyone I had brought shame to the Carters. But fate has a strange sense of justice. The same people who humiliated me in public now stood before me, broken, pleading, calling me daughter again. And as I looked into their eyes, I realized something chilling. This wasn't just payback, it was destiny reclaiming its balance. They say every family looks perfect from the outside. And for years, I believed mine truly was. The Carters, known for our charm, our wealth, our spotless reputation. My father, Thomas Carter, built his empire from nothing, and my mother, Margaret, guarded it like a queen protecting her throne. My brother, Lucas, was the golden son, born with confidence that everyone mistook for leadership. And my younger sister, Lydia, she was the peacekeeper, always smiling, always agreeing. And then there was me, Amelia, the middle child, the quiet one, the one who did everything right but somehow was never enough. Our home was like a museum, grand, cold, and filled with rules. Dinner was a performance. Every night, crystal glasses clinked, silver cutlery gleamed, and my mother's voice cut through the air with gentle precision. Lucas got another promotion, she'd announce proudly. Father would nod, satisfied. Lydia would beam. And I'd smile too, pretending it didn't sting that no one ever asked about my day. I tried to please them. I studied what they wanted, dressed how they expected, and learned to smile when I felt invisible. When guests visited, my mother would introduce me as our quiet one, so polite, so disciplined. But her eyes always wandered back to Lucas, as if I were just a shadow in his light. Sometimes, I'd catch my father watching me with disappointment he didn't even try to hide. You should be more like your brother, he'd say. Lucas knows what it takes to protect the Carter name. Protect the name, that was his favorite phrase. It was never about protecting hearts. I used to think that if I just worked harder, spoke softer, or dressed better, maybe they'd see me. But love in our home had conditions, status, image, obedience. I learned that silence kept the peace. So I became silent. Until one night, something inside me cracked. It was during one of those perfect dinners. My father was praising Lucas again, boasting about how he'd secured a big client for the company. My mother was glowing with pride. I made the mistake of sharing that I'd received an offer from an independent art gallery, something I'd been dreaming of for years. Father didn't even look up from his plate. Art doesn't feed families, he said flatly. Leave the serious work to people with discipline. Everyone laughed softly. Everyone but me. I felt my chest tighten. My hands shook, but I hid it under the tablecloth. It wasn't just about art, it was about being unseen, again. About realizing that no matter what I did, I would never fit their version of worthy. That night, I sat by my window long after the lights went out, staring into the dark streets below, wondering what it would feel like to belong somewhere without pretending. And then, as if fate had heard that silent thought, I saw a man across the street fixing a broken car under a dim streetlight. His sleeves were rolled up, his hands steady, his expression calm. For the first time, someone looked at me not as a Carter, but as a person. I didn't know it then, but that moment would change everything. Love wasn't supposed to feel like rebellion. But in my family, it did. After that night at dinner, I started sneaking away to the edge of town, to that small garage where I'd first seen Ethan. He wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. He spoke softly but with conviction. He didn't care about names, money, or how others looked at him. He cared about effort, about honesty, about people. When he fixed my car, I offered to pay him, and he just smiled. Keep your money. You look like someone who could use a little kindness instead. That one sentence undid me. No one in my world had ever said something like that. Weeks passed, and I found myself drawn to him. I'd stop by the garage after work, bringing coffee, helping with small tasks, laughing about things I'd never dared laugh about at home. For the first time, I felt seen. And that was the beginning of my undoing. Because in the Carter family, being yourself was the biggest crime of all. When my mother found out, it was through gossip, of course. Mrs. Nolan, the neighborhood's self-appointed moral guardian, told her she'd seen Amelia Carter, our town's princess, chatting with a mechanic like she's forgotten her breeding. The next evening, my mother's voice echoed through the house like a storm. Is it true? You're seeing a garage worker. I froze, my throat dry. His name is Ethan. And yes, Ethan, she spat, as if the name itself was dirt. What kind of family raises their daughter to throw away her reputation on a man with grease on his hands? My father entered then, silent but seething. His eyes carried more judgment than any words could. You've humiliated us, Amelia. Do you know what people will say? Lucas chuckled from the couch. Guess the art gallery wasn't rebellious enough, huh? His smirk made my blood boil. You think this is a joke? I snapped. Calm down, Amelia, my mother said coldly. You're emotional. You always have been. This phase will pass. Phase. That word sliced through me. They couldn't even see that this was love, not rebellion. Days turned into weeks of silence and shame. My phone was taken. My car keys gone. Every conversation turned into an argument. My father stopped speaking to me entirely. My mother pretended I didn't exist during dinners. Lucas, meanwhile, soaked in their approval, basking in his role as the heir, the perfect son. I tried to hold on. Tried to reason with them. He's a good man, Dad. He works hard. He's kind. My father's voice was ice. A man's kindness doesn't build empires. He's beneath you. Beneath me. That was their logic, status over soul, appearances over truth. The tension kept building until one night, it finally broke. It was Lydia's birthday, a grand celebration with family friends, partners, and half the town's elite. I wore a forced smile as the cameras flashed, pretending to be the obedient daughter one last time. Then Lucas, ever the provocateur, raised his glass and said loudly, to our family's bright future, and to Amelia, who's apparently found hers in a repair shop. The laughter that followed burned deeper than any insult. Faces I'd known my whole life turned to me with mocking curiosity. My mother didn't even flinch. My father just stared at his glass. Something inside me snapped. I stood, my voice trembling. At least he earns his respect. You all buy yours. The room went still. Gasps echoed. My father rose, face red with fury. Enough. You are no longer a Carter if you continue this shame. I looked around the table, at the faces that had once meant family, and realized I had already lost them long before this night. I'd rather have nothing, I said quietly, than live in a house built on pride and fear. And with that, I walked out, no shoes, no plan, just the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest. But as the door closed behind me, I didn't know that this wasn't the end of my humiliation. It was only the beginning of the storm that would one day destroy the Carters from within. After that night, silence became my new companion. My parents didn't yell anymore, they didn't have to. Their silence was louder than any argument, more punishing than any words. I became invisible in my own home. My name was erased from conversations, my presence treated like an inconvenience. Every morning, I'd sit at the dining table, hoping someone would acknowledge me. My father read his newspaper as if I didn't exist. My mother stirred her coffee with precision, never once looking up. Lucas laughed with Lydia about weekend plans, ignoring me completely. And yet, despite the coldness, I stayed. Maybe I hoped they'd change their minds. Maybe I still believed family meant forgiveness. But I was wrong. It was during our annual Carter Foundation Gala, our biggest event of the year, when the true cruelty began. The ballroom glimmered with chandeliers and polished marble floors. Everyone wore smiles so perfectly practiced they looked painted on. I stood quietly near the corner, dressed in a gown my mother had chosen, feeling more like a mannequin than a daughter. When Mrs. Nolan approached my mother, her voice carried across the hall. I heard Amelia's little romance didn't last long, she said with a smirk. Mechanics aren't known for staying loyal, are they? My cheeks burned. I turned toward my mother, praying she would defend me, deny the rumor, something. But she just smiled tightly and replied, we all make mistakes in youth, don't we? Laughter rippled around us. My stomach twisted as the whispers began again. Such a shame, all that beauty wasted. The Carter girl, chasing a poor man. I felt my throat close. I walked away before my tears could betray me. In the restroom, I stared at my reflection. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, hollow eyes. I whispered, they don't even see me anymore. But someone had seen. Lydia found me there. Mia, she said softly, I didn't know Mom would say that. I turned to her, voice trembling. Then why didn't you stop her? She lowered her eyes. Because she would have turned on me too. That night, I didn't return home right away. I drove to Ethan's garage. He was still there, wiping grease from his hands when he saw me. His face softened instantly. What happened? I broke down. They humiliated me, Ethan. In front of everyone. He pulled me into his arms. You don't need them to prove who you are. You have me. I wanted to believe him. I truly did. But deep down, I knew love couldn't shield us from the cruelty of a proud family. The next morning, the humiliation went public. Someone, probably Lucas, had leaked my picture from the gala, paired with a cruel caption, "From pearls to petrol." It went viral in our circle. People laughed. Clients whispered. My father called me into his office. Do you realize what you've done to our name? He thundered. I didn't do anything wrong. I cried. He slammed his fist on the desk. You embarrassed this family twice, first by loving beneath you, now by being the subject of gossip. I stared at him, numb. Maybe the family embarrassed itself by caring more about gossip than truth. That was the last conversation we had as father and daughter. From that day on, my mother refused to speak my name. Lucas treated me like a cautionary tale. Lydia tried to stay close but was too afraid to be seen with me. I ate meals alone, existed quietly, and pretended not to hear the laughter that followed when I walked past. But pain doesn't stay silent forever. It builds. It collects in the heart until one day, it spills over. Late one night, I overheard them speaking. My father, my mother, and Lucas. She's becoming a liability, my mother said sharply. If she doesn't stop, we'll have to make it official. My father's voice was calm, almost cold. Then so be it. Something inside me froze. Official? I pressed my hand against the wall, heart racing. I knew what they meant. They weren't just cutting me off emotionally. They were about to erase me completely. From the family, from the inheritance, from everything that connected me to the name Carter. And as I stood there, listening to their voices seal my fate, I realized one thing. The family I was fighting to be part of had already decided to destroy me. I always believed betrayal came with noise, screaming, slamming doors, chaos. But when it finally arrived, it was quiet. Cold. Calculated. The morning after I overheard my parents plotting to make it official, I found a neatly folded envelope placed on my nightstand. No note, no warning, just my name in my mother's perfect handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with legal wording so sharp it might as well have been a knife, formal disinheritance notice. My hands trembled as I read the words. Effective immediately, Amelia Carter shall no longer be recognized as a legal heir or representative of the Carter estate. I could barely breathe. My chest tightened as the room blurred. They hadn't even said it to my face. When I confronted them, they were in the study, my father by the fireplace, my mother seated beside him like a queen signing away a servant. Why? I whispered. You couldn't even speak to me before cutting me out of your lives. My father didn't look up. You made your choice, Amelia. You chose to shame this family. I chose love. I shouted, voice cracking. I chose someone who sees me, not the Carter name. My mother's tone was smooth as glass. Love doesn't feed legacy. We raised you better. Something inside me broke then, not just my heart, but the last fragile thread of belonging I'd been clinging to. You didn't raise me, I said quietly. You built me like one of your trophies. And the second I stopped shining, you threw me away. For a moment, I thought I saw guilt flicker across Lydia's face as she stood near the door. But she said nothing. No one ever did. Lucas smirked, hands in his pockets. Come on, Mia. It's not that deep. You wanted to play the rebel. This is just the price. The price. My own brother talking about my life like a bad investment. That night, I packed my bags. Not a single person tried to stop me. My mother didn't even come to the doorway. My father didn't look up from his paperwork. As I walked out of that mansion, I realized something chilling. Families don't always kill you with cruelty. Sometimes, they kill you with indifference. Ethan was waiting outside in his old pickup truck. When he saw me, his face filled with concern. Mia, what happened? I tried to answer, but all I could do was cry. He held me until my sobs turned to silence. We drove all night. I didn't know where we were going, only that I was finally leaving behind everything I'd ever known. By sunrise, we were standing in front of a small, run-down apartment complex on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, peeling paint, flickering lights, but when Ethan smiled and said, "Welcome home," I felt something I'd never felt in that mansion: peace. The first few months were hard. I worked at a local diner while Ethan fixed cars. We counted every dollar, shared every meal, and laughed through the struggle. For once, I wasn't living to please anyone. I was simply living. But peace doesn't last long when you're born into pride. One evening, while cleaning tables at the diner, I overheard two businessmen talking. The Carters, one said. Still untouchable. Though I heard something about a shady deal with their company's shares. My stomach twisted. Their company, my father's empire. My brother's kingdom. Still thriving, still untouchable. And me? Just another nameless waitress. I went home that night, quiet and distant. Ethan noticed. "You're thinking about them again," he said softly. I sighed. I can't believe they could erase me like I never existed. And they are still winning. He took my hand. Winning isn't about what they own, Mia. It's about what they've lost. You have peace, they don't. I wanted to believe that. But deep down, something darker began to stir. A quiet voice whispered, "They don't deserve peace." Months turned into a year. Life went on. I built myself up piece by piece, starting from nothing. I learned to fix cars beside Ethan. Learned to handle customers. Learned the meaning of dignity that wasn't borrowed from a family name. But even as I smiled, something inside me never healed. The wound wasn't just about being rejected, it was about being erased. I could forgive pain, but not erasure. Then, one afternoon, fate handed me the first spark of retribution. A local newspaper printed a small article buried in the business section: Carter Industries accused of financial misconduct. My fingers froze over the page. Apparently, the untouchable Carters had been accused of manipulating charity funds through shell donations. My father's firm was under investigation. Lucas's name was mentioned as a possible accomplice. For a moment, I felt shock. Then disbelief. And then, a calmness I hadn't felt in years. I folded the paper slowly and whispered, "So, this is how it begins." Ethan looked at me, cautious. "Mia?" I smiled faintly. No anger, no tears. Just quiet resolve. They took everything from me, Ethan. My name, my respect, my family. But the truth. I paused, feeling the fire rise again. The truth has a way of coming back. That night, I sat by the window just like I had years ago, staring into the dark. But this time, I wasn't the scared daughter begging to be seen. I was the woman who had nothing left to lose. And that's when I made a silent promise to myself. They destroyed me once. Now, I'll make sure the world sees who they really are. They say time heals everything. But for me, time didn't heal, it sharpened. It turned my pain into precision. My tears dried, and in their place, something colder took root: clarity. The article about Carter Industries kept replaying in my mind like an unfinished symphony. The family that disowned me was finally cracking. For years, they built their empire on the illusion of perfection. Now, one single scandal threatened to expose the truth behind their polished smiles. But this wasn't about revenge for humiliation anymore, it was about justice. About showing the world who they really were. Ethan noticed the change in me. One evening, as we closed up the garage, he said quietly, "You've been reading those reports every night. What are you planning, Mia?" I looked at him and said softly, "I'm not planning revenge, Ethan. I'm planning closure." He smiled sadly. "Just promise me you won't lose yourself again." I wanted to, but deep down, I knew I already had. The first step was information. I knew the Carters' world inside out. Their partners, their hidden accounts, their secret deals. Growing up in that house taught me how to listen when no one thought I was paying attention. I began reaching out to old contacts, people who had been cast aside by my family just like me, ex-employees, vendors, and especially Lydia. Lydia had always lived in my shadow, torn between loyalty and fear. When I called her, there was a long silence on the line before she whispered, "Mia, I was waiting for your call." We met secretly in a cafe outside the city. She looked nervous but relieved. "They think I don't know what's going on," she said. "But Lucas and Dad have been moving money through fake donations for years. I've seen the reports. I can get them to you." My heart pounded. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "You deserve the truth. And so does everyone else." Over the next few weeks, we met in secret, passing USB drives, emails, and documents. Each file revealed another layer of deceit: funds siphoned, charities forged, signatures faked. My father's pride had turned into greed, and Lucas had followed his lead like a perfect heir. I contacted a journalist I once knew from my art days, someone who had built a reputation for exposing corruption. I didn't give my real name at first. I just said, "I have a story that will shake this city." They agreed to meet. When I finally handed over the files, the weight of years of silence lifted off my shoulders. But I wasn't done. I needed to make sure the story hit not just the papers, but the Carters themselves. I planned it carefully. The perfect timing, the perfect exposure. My family was hosting another gala, this one to restore their reputation amid the quiet whispers of scandal. Every camera, every reporter, every influential guest would be there. And so would I. The day before the event, Lydia called me, her voice trembling. "Mia, are you sure about this? Once this happens, there's no going back." I paused, looking at the reflection of the woman I'd become. My eyes weren't the same. They carried fire instead of fear. "I've already gone too far to turn back," I said. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, holding the invitation I'd received anonymously. My mother must have assumed it was good publicity to welcome the lost daughter. Irony had a cruel sense of humor. Ethan placed his hands on my shoulders. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he whispered, "don't forget, you've already won by standing tall." I smiled faintly. "Tomorrow isn't about standing tall," I said. "It's about watching them fall." As I slipped into the black dress that once symbolized sorrow and now felt like armor, I realized something. Revenge didn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispered. It planned. It waited. And mine was ready. The gala was tomorrow night. The world would finally see the truth. But even I didn't know, some secrets, once exposed, destroy more than just reputations. They destroy bloodlines. The night of the gala shimmered like a lie polished to perfection. The Carter mansion stood glowing under chandeliers and camera lights, every inch of marble screaming wealth and reputation. But beneath the glamour, I knew the walls were trembling. I arrived in silence. No chauffeur, no entourage, just me in a black gown that whispered power. Heads turned as I walked through the entrance. Some recognized me instantly. Others whispered in disbelief. She came back. Yes. The daughter they erased had returned. Inside, my parents were entertaining guests near the stage. My father's laughter boomed, too loud, too forced. My mother's smile was flawless, but her eyes darted nervously each time a journalist approached. Lucas stood nearby, glass in hand, arrogance painted across his face. When he saw me, his smirk faltered. "Well," he said, stepping closer, "the prodigal disgrace returns. Bold of you to show your face." I met his eyes without flinching. "Bold of you to assume I'm still ashamed." He sneered. "You'll always be the mistake of this family, Amelia." "Then tonight," I said quietly, "let's make that official." Before he could respond, the lights dimmed slightly. The music softened. A presenter took the microphone, ready to introduce the Carters for their philanthropic achievements. My parents took center stage, smiling for the cameras. The crowd applauded. That's when the giant screen behind them flickered. At first, it showed their company's logo. Then, one by one, images began appearing. Documents. Bank transfers. Fake charity receipts. Signatures. Screenshots. Every secret Lydia and I had uncovered. A collective gasp swept through the hall. The presenter froze mid-sentence. My mother's smile vanished. My father's jaw tightened. Lucas's glass shattered on the floor. Whispers erupted. "Is that real? Oh my God, that's Carter Industries. They forged donations." Reporters raised their cameras. Phones flashed. Chaos unfolded. And then, My voice echoed from the speakers.
I had pre-recorded it. Calm. Clear.
Unforgiving. 4 years, the Carter family preached dignity, respect, and charity. But behind closed doors, they built their empire on deceit and greed. They erased anyone who stood in their way, even their own blood. My mother's head whipped toward the control booth.
Turn it off, she shouted. But the doors were already closing, locked.
The video continued, showing signatures, my father's, Lucas's, next to fraudulent accounts.
The crowd's murmurs turned to outrage.
Tonight, my recorded voice said, the world deserves to see what true betrayal looks like. I stepped forward then, in real time, and all eyes turned to me. You wanted to erase me, I said softly, my voice carrying through the stunned silence. You should have known. I learned your tricks better than anyone.
My father's face turned red.
You think this makes you strong, Amelia? You've ruined your family. No, I said, steady. You ruined it the day you chose pride over love.
Reporters surged forward. Questions exploded.
Lydia stood near the side, tears streaming down her face. But for the first time, they weren't tears of fear. They were of freedom. My mother stepped toward me, her voice trembling for the first time.
Please, stop this. You don't understand what you're doing.
I looked at her, the woman who had once taught me to smile through pain. Oh, I understand perfectly.
You built this family on lies.
I'm just showing everyone the truth. Security tried to calm the chaos, but it was too late.
The damage was done.
The story had already gone live across the city. My father tried to speak again, but the microphones caught nothing but his shaking breath.
He looked older suddenly, smaller.
Lucas backed away, his confidence shattered. The guests began leaving, whispering, judging. Reporters crowded the exits, broadcasting live. I stood still, watching the empire that once crushed me crumble in front of hundreds. 4 years, I'd dreamed of this moment. Revenge, justice, redemption. But as I watched my parents' faces collapse under the weight of exposure, I didn't feel triumph.
I felt something deeper. Release. I stepped closer to them one last time.
You once told me I brought shame to the Carter name, I said. Now the world knows, it was never me. My father tried to reach for me, but I stepped back.
Don't, I whispered. You taught me the price of pride. Tonight, you'll pay it.
As I turned and walked away, the cameras caught the final image, the disgraced Carters frozen under the glare of truth, surrounded by the ruins of their own deception. Outside, the cold night air hit my face like freedom. Reporters shouted questions, flashes lit the sky, but I kept walking, the echo of their downfall fading behind me. Because in that moment, justice wasn't loud. It was silent. It was complete. And the daughter they banished had finally come home, not for forgiveness, but for closure. The morning after the gala, the city woke up to headlines that tore through the illusion my family had built for decades. Carter Empire exposed for fraud. Prestigious family under investigation for charity scandal. The mansion that once symbolized pride now looked hollow, stripped of its glory. Cameras swarmed the gates. Reporters called it the fall of the Carters. And for the first time, my parents couldn't hide behind their wealth or their name.
I didn't go there to see them. I didn't need to.
The world had already seen what I'd seen my whole life, the truth behind the smiles.
Lydia called me that evening.
Her voice was quiet, heavy. They are finished, Mia. The company, the reputation, it's all gone. Dad barely speaks. Mom doesn't leave her room.
For a moment, I said nothing.
Part of me wanted to feel pity, but pity is a luxury I'd run out of long ago. Are you okay? She asked softly.
I took a deep breath.
For the first time in my life, yes. Silence lingered between us, not heavy, but peaceful.
She sighed.
I wish it didn't have to end like this. It didn't end, I said. It began. Because that's what it was, a beginning. Not of revenge, not of victory, but of freedom. That night, Ethan and I walked along the quiet streets outside our small apartment. The sky was clear, the air still. He looked at me with that same gentle steadiness that first drew me to him. Do you feel lighter? He asked. I smiled faintly. I feel seen. He nodded, then said something I'll never forget. You didn't destroy them, Amelia. You just stopped protecting their lies. I stopped walking, the weight of his words sinking in.
He was right.
My revenge hadn't been about vengeance, it was about truth. And truth, no matter how painful, is the purest form of justice. Days passed, then weeks. The investigations deepened. My father was questioned. Lucas disappeared from public view. My mother's charity events were cancelled one by one. Their empire crumbled quietly, the same way they had once erased me, silently, completely.
But I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply lived.
I went back to the garage, to the life I had built with my own hands. I started painting again, colors and emotions I had long buried returning to me in every brushstroke. I even opened a small art studio above the garage. People began to visit, drawn not by my last name, but by my work. Sometimes, new clients would ask about my past, about the scandal that everyone had heard of. I would just smile and say, "That's another lifetime."
Because it was.
One evening, as I locked the studio, I found Lydia waiting at the door. Her eyes were red, but her smile was genuine.
She hugged me tightly. "They miss you," she whispered.
I placed a hand on her shoulder.
"I don't hate them, Lydia. I just can't go back.
Some doors have to stay closed for peace to exist."
She nodded, tears falling.
"You were always the strongest of us." I looked at her gently and said, "No. I just stopped asking for love from people who didn't know how to give it." That was the truth, the quiet, final lesson of it all. As she left, I stood by the window, watching the fading sunlight paint the sky in shades of orange and gold.
It felt like closure.
Not the kind that comes from revenge, but from release. Because dignity isn't something you inherit, it's something you fight for. And once you reclaim it, no one can take it away again. Respect built on fear will always crumble, I whispered to myself. But self-respect, that's what survives the fire. And with that, I closed the lights, locked the studio, and walked home, no longer a Carter, but something far greater. A woman who finally learned that peace is the sweetest revenge of all.